Hello. I wanted to talk about the voice in the voice production in music. Of all the musical instruments, the voice is the most perfect because it the most instantly and clearly expresses the feelings and consciousness behind it. A flute, a cello, an organ, whatever instrument you talk about, is really, in a very definite sense, an extension of the voice. And also, in all the arts, music is probably the most important because it expresses most instantly the feelings of a person, more instantly than the visual arts, more instantly than really any kind of expression. Writing, although I write myself, I find a constant frustration in the fact that I can't really communicate directly with the reader. I do my best. I visualize somebody that I'm talking to. I feel that I put as much as I can of my vibrations into the words. Nonetheless, it's not the same thing as the voice. And of all means of communication, even more than visually, even more than the eyes, or perhaps I should say at least as much as the eyes, the voice will tell you what you are, what you're thinking, what your consciousness is. And that's why Master sometimes quoted Jesus in his statement, "Out of the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaketh." Out of the way that we live in our consciousness, our voice will be a reproduction, it'll be sort of an overflow of that. Now the voice is the most difficult part, I should say the most difficult instrument to teach a person how to produce. And very few people, even in bel canto and in Western teaching, very few people understand the voice in the way that I'm wanting, I hope, to be able to explain it to you. In India, you don't find that they do that. In fact, oddly enough, they try to teach you to sing in such a way as to imitate the sound of the veena. You know, it's a nasal and not a very attractive sound. And when I talked to an Indian about the importance of vocal placement, she was a singer, had been trained for many years, and she looked at me condescendingly as if I didn't know what I was talking about. But when it came right down to it, she didn't sing attractively, and wherever I went in India, people rushed out with the harmonium because my fame as a singer had preceded me. So I have to believe that the Indians, even if they don't know about voice placement, are attracted by a voice that does get placed correctly. Now, my singing teacher, I was very fortunate in this respect. She was recommended to me by a well-known musician, Arthur Schnabel, I think it was, in New York, who had taught my mother also the piano, but he was well known in his field. And he said that this teacher, Marie Zimmerman, is the best one I know. And the thing that was very impressive to me in that respect was that when I went to Mexico that summer, this was the summer of 1945, I was only 19, and I got an opportunity to sing for the foremost voice singing teacher in Mexico City. And the first thing she said after hearing me was, "Never change your teacher." So she could instantly recognize the value of the method that she taught. Now I say this after having heard many prominent singing teachers, studied under some of them, and found that their technique did not nearly match hers. And yet hers was completely different. She didn't get me to do a lot of vocalizing and so on. She got me first just to place the voice correctly. She said to me at the start, "This is the only instrument that you can't see. You can see a violin, you can see how to show a person how to place his fingers on the violin strings, on the bow, you can see how a person places his fingers on the piano. Every instrument except the voice you can show. how to play it. But you can't do that with the voice, and so all you can do is imitate. I will place my voice correctly, and you will try to imitate it. She didn't allow me even to sing for at least a month. After I'd been singing with her for about a month, then she allowed me to sing, to do a little practicing. I meant sing on my own. She allowed me to do it at home also. But until then, she said, all you'll do is reinforce bad habits. So better not do anything until then. I didn't study with her long. I only studied for 6 months. Interestingly enough, I've developed quite a few theories after taking up yoga and learning about the chakras and learning about the spiritual side of the human body and psyche. I have developed other things, but I remember probably it was the last class that I took from her, and I've always felt badly that I didn't go back to her because I know it meant a lot to her, but I didn't want to sing. I didn't want to be a singer professionally. I didn't see that there were any songs that I wanted to devote my life to singing. They were all songs, even the classical ones, and those are the ones I studied. Most of them were just the usual old sickly, mawkish sentimentality, and it was not good poetry, not lofty sentiments, and I was seeking the truth. But you probably remember from reading my book, The Path, how at her very last lesson that she gave me, she was 75 at the time, and she raised her hand like this. She said, I'm only living for one thing now, and that's to see you become a great singer. And I felt so awkward by that, because I had no wish to be a singer at all, what to speak of a great one. But I've told you that story, and it's in The Path. The one thing I haven't said that I think is worth saying now, because it ties in to what we need to talk about, that was, she continued, she added, it isn't just your voice. She said, many people have beautiful voices, but you have a mind, you understand. And that's what I want you to do when you sing. I don't want you just to produce a beautiful tone. Too many people, when they sing, are interested in producing beautiful tone, even to the point of sacrificing the song itself, so they can hold a note longer with the vowels extended and get the most beautiful quality out of their voice. That is not a singer's job. A singer's job is interpretative. And the singer should therefore try to think, what is this song trying to express? Or let us assume that it's a lousy song and he's stuck with singing it, and he doesn't really want to express the song, but he should express something bigger than himself. What would that be? Well, God. And that we understand as devotees, that the first thing we should try to express in our singing is the divine inspiration we feel inside. And then we should channel that inspiration through the song itself and try to bring it into outward manifestation so that we ourselves don't really count in the story. We have to try to make our voices as clear and as beautiful as possible. You want to make the instrument a clear channel, not a muddy channel, that's obvious. But what I want to talk about here is how to make that channel clearer and less muddy. One of the most important things is that your voice, whether you like it or not, is going to reflect who you are. And who you are has several levels of reality. There are certain voice identification checks that will get your voice no matter what mood you're in or how you speak, because there's an underlying quality in the voice that is simply yours. And if they catch that, you can say a thing angrily or sweetly and it won't make that much difference. Well, that's the long range. I had a very funny, or I should say at least interesting experience in Patna in India. Many years ago, I was sitting in the Patna airport and I had long hair and I was dressed in my orange robe, and I was talking with Indians, and I was just waiting for my plane. and just talking. We were talking English, but an American came over from a nearby table, and he said, "You sound like one of the Walters, are you?" And I was so astonished, and I looked at him more carefully, and I realized that he was an old friend of my family that I'd known 20 years before, but hadn't seen probably in all that time. And his name was Mr. Gibbon. In fact, it's odd, all these little ties. His daughter, Harriet, married the man who became the doctor for the man who sold us Ananda village. And he had been in, he was a terminal cancer patient, but the doctor told me that, well, as it turned out, and the doctor confirmed it, after selling the land to Ananda, his case went into remission and the cancer went away. And the doctor confirmed that. I've always thought that was a miracle. Anyway, I don't want to get off the subject like that, but it's fascinating to see what a web life creates in all our relationships. So anyway, he recognized my voice. It's not that my brothers and others in the family have the same voice, but he could tell this was one of the Walters, and he didn't quite remember my name at that moment. Well, I have sometimes come to another country, picked up the phone, dialed a friend, and said, Swami! As though they were so surprised to hear from me, but they knew my voice. Well, this is something that maybe my voice is more particular, but everybody's voice is his own. And you need to not get that out of the way when you sing. You want to sing from your own being. I don't want you to sing fakely, that's all. I don't want you to hold a note long just because in holding your vowels, your voice comes out more beautifully. If it's a nervous song, sing as if you were nervous, but always sing as if you were on a higher level than that nervousness, so that whatever the song expresses, impatience, nervousness, whatever, and I hope that the songs you sing won't do that, but still, Deirdre Sorrows gives an example of that. And in singing that, I didn't feel at all that I was going through that. It was rather like looking back on another life, not my life in that case, but from the distance that you achieve when you were in superconsciousness, looking back and seeing how God expressed himself in that life, in those circumstances, in that tragedy. But it's not a tragedy in eternity. Nothing's a tragedy then. And so when you sing from a higher state of consciousness, you can bring, in fact, here was a very interesting thing that happened. A woman came to me many years ago. She's prominent in opera in France. And she says that because of her voice, because it's an alto voice with a deep quality to it, she always gets assigned the leading villainess in the opera. And for her, she found that it was very inspiring. She had asked me, how can I not get caught up in the negative emotions of that villainess in the opera? And I told her, and she corroborated that was what she did. She said that people listening to her have actually told her that they feel inspired listening to her expressing all these supposedly negative emotions, because yes, she expresses them, but not with the inner consciousness of it, rather with the consciousness of one. And this was my suggestion, that just as we go through many incarnations, living in all sorts of circumstances, all sorts of roles, yet at the end, when we achieve freedom from ego and look back on those lives, we can see that God lived that particular role for a while, and it was a dream, but it was still God dreaming. God trying to find the buried happiness that was there in the soul, trying to come out. That was my suggestion to her, that she sing those roles as if to liberate herself from that. And she said she'd already done that to some extent by her own intuitive recognition. And as I told you, she said that many people had told her that they felt real inspiration listening to her. Well, that's what you want to do. Whatever you sing, try to be a channel for inspiration. And that will come automatically into the quality of your voice. Now, the next level up is who you are. Yes, that's something that you're born with. It's something that you've perhaps honed to some extent. It's something that will change over a period of time, but your own cavities here and the sounding board of your cheeks and whatever, all of these things are going to influence the quality of your voice. The next thing will be the feelings that you're going through. Those are more ephemeral, they're of the moment. Try not to allow your own feelings to get into the story, into the picture. The more you can keep yourself out, the more what you produce will be a work of art. Because a work of art is when the artist himself channels something greater than he is. It can never be something done from the ego. I want, I am doing, I will produce, I am creating. It can't go that way. So the more you can eliminate the sense of ego, get out of the picture, and then be an inspiration. An inspiration for what? For inspiration itself, for joy, for love. But then, if your ego is out of the picture, then you can't afford to have personal emotions. And singing, in fact, is wonderful therapy just in that way, that when you're upset, instead of putting your tragic feelings and sufferings and misery into your voice, try by the very act of rising above them so you can sing well, to rise above those moods or depressions in actual reality. So many different things enter into it, but the more centered you are in yourself, the more the voice will come out clearly, inspiringly, and well. Now, in your practice of singing, let me first teach you what she taught me, and then go from there to talking more about centeredness and the chakras and upliftment of consciousness and so on. Because what Marie Zimmerman taught me was the standard technique of using the body as a sounding board. The chest with a big chest tone, and the cheeks with more of a nasal tone, and the head with more of a head tone, and all of this is a sounding board. But the philosophy of singing, even in modern times, is more the philosophy of those days when they didn't have microphones, didn't have good quality loudspeakers, and had to bellow in such a way that the whole hall could be filled. Now here we have an advantage over that. If you listen to Pavarotti, you'll hear that whether he's singing a love song or a martial song, it'll sound more or less exactly the same. If you don't know the words, and the rhythm doesn't do it for you, and the melody doesn't do it for you, you probably couldn't tell the two apart just from his vocal production. And yet nowadays, and here was something that happened to me years ago that I found very interesting. I was in a Church of Religious Science, I think, in Santa Barbara, and Dr. Lester Bashara, who has since died, but he was the minister there, and he asked me if I wanted to use the loudspeaker system. Well, the hall was only big enough for 200 people, and I said, oh, I have no problem projecting. I wouldn't need the loudspeaker. Well, by accident or design, he left the loudspeaker system, the microphone, turned on. And I found, to my surprise, that even though I could easily fill the hall with my words, still, with the microphone, I could modulate my voice below that certain level that was needed to bring my voice out to everybody. I could talk even in a whisper. I could talk very softly. And as a result, I could get much more range of spiritual inspiration, power, whatever, into my voice than if I hadn't had the microphone. So I think that the microphone in many ways is a great blessing, even though it has to be controlled and it's not always easy to do it. When I was doing Love as a Magician, my tendency, because the feeling is strong at the beginning, is to say, love is all I know. But I realized, or I quickly realized after listening to the first take, that love was a blurting sound. It was overwhelming. And so I had to hold my voice back and try to put the feeling into it that I would have liked to put out in volume. Also, I had to hold it back and say, love is all I know, and then build up from there. That's another thing that people do in reading and in singing, and that is that they tend, this is even more true in speaking, but this is something to learn also. Their sentences go like this. Now, I don't know if it's always so in Italian or Spanish or whatever, but it certainly seems to be so, that they start out soft, get a little louder, and then fade off to non-audibility. And really, the power in music, too, is if you can keep that all the way through to the end of the phrase, so that you're not singing, sun rays on the snow, like a winter long in darkness without song. You see, it dies out. And the tendency of the singer is to speak, or the speaker also, to use the voice that way, where at the end of the sentence you get weaker, sort of thinking as if this is the way you end a phrase. But indeed it's not. In darkness without song. It should keep the power going all the way to the end, not let it fade out, because that's where the audience is left with a ringing sense of the power of the song. Whereas the other one is sort of coming out and blurting out a few words and then retiring bashfully behind the scenes. You want to keep out there and know this is what you mean. So sing with that kind of power. But the beauty of a microphone is, if it's a good loudspeaker system, then not a scratchy one, that you can modulate your voice a great deal more. Nonetheless, even so, our voice needs to be recognized as a sounding board. And I used to listen to Ram. You know, it's an interesting thing. The song Life Flows On Like a River, I wrote it for a bass because Jeannie said, why don't you write a song for a bass? So for no higher motive than that, I wrote it, and then realized it could be applied beautifully to St. Francis, and I wrote the words for that. But when you listen to Ram, he has a bass voice, doesn't he? If you listen to my voice, it's really what my singing teacher told me, a high baritone, when I'm in good shape vocally, which I'm usually not, but anyway, it's much higher in tone. Do you realize I can sing a whole note lower than Ram? We had to move that song up a note for Ram to be able to sing it. But he has those chest tones that give it that full-bodied feeling that I can't get, because I don't have my voice doesn't come as much from that part of my body as his does. You listen to Ram singing, ho, ho, ho. It's so beautiful to hear. But it's very much of a chest tone. Mine is more of higher in the head kind of tone. Well, in any case, we need all those tones. Which part we emphasize depends on many factors, but you need to be able to bring the tone into it from your chest, first of all. In fact, what my singing teacher taught me was to keep the chest up while you sing and use the diaphragm. And I suppose you'd use the floating ribs too, but she didn't talk about that so much. The main thing is to keep the chest up. And you know, while I was singing, in the 6 months that I studied with her, my waist became a whole inch wider because I had to use those muscles so much. I don't want to discourage girls from singing right just because they don't want big waists. Anyway, we're talking of singing, not waists, right? And so the thing is that when you use your diaphragm, you can hold a tone much longer. I've always been, speaking of women and waists, I've always been envious of Kalyani, because she can take a tone and just hold it and hold it and hold it, and I'm huffing and puffing after the first third of that note. I've always had, as you know, a heart murmur. Now I don't, but I still have more trouble that way. But it's very important to breathe right. And you will see some of those classical singers, how long they can hold a note. It's incredible. But the only way they can do it is by breathing diaphragmatically. Well, after that, there's more to it than that. when I would sing, she would first sing a note, and it would always be in the beginning just a hum. And then I'd try. And then no. She said, get more of the H in it. Well, that H brought the chest into it. You feel this tone down here. Then, you see, you have to get the throat relaxed. You see, what happens is that if you have, for example, a hose, and you want to bring pressure to come out of that hose, you can do it in two ways. You can tighten the hose, or you can turn on the faucet, turn it open more. If you tighten the hose of the voice, you can get a louder tone from saying, what? See, just by tightening this I did it, but it's a very unlovely tone. In fact, that's what I don't like about Schubert's famous song, Who is Sylvia, from Shakespeare's lyrics. And the reason I don't like it is that he wrote it for the German, but if you apply it to the English, who is Sylvia, what is she, and what is not a beautiful sound. So it's a pity that he had to give such a long note to such an ugly word. But it isn't that way in the German. But when I did it, I gave it the shortness that was its due. Who is Sylvia? What is she? And, well, this isn't a songwriting class, but you can keep this thought in mind. To give the notes the equivalent to the vocal quality of the word that you're going to use, or vice versa, because sometimes I write the words first and then the music, like all the music that I wrote for the recitatives in the oratorio. I wrote the words first and then put the music to it. But I had to make the music fit the words. I couldn't change that. So when you sing with the vocal cords completely relaxed, then you'll find that the sound goes upward into the head more. And a hum is the best way to begin that process, because it keeps it in the head, it brings it up into the nasal passages. So humming is the best warm-up. And in fact, I was walking down in a mall with Vairagi and a couple of others recently in Italy, and she said, "Are you talking to yourself?" And I said, "No, I vocalize. I always do that when I'm out in public. It's a good thing to do. People aren't listening to you anyway." Well, she was, but most people don't. So I just sort of go, and then when I have to do a singing thing, I'm already warmed up because I've been practicing it. But that H sound first. And she made me redo that again and again till I finally got Then you bring it here more naturally, the more you relax here. Then you try to focus it. See, bringing it up into this sounding board is good, but you need to focus it. And this spiritual eye, which she didn't know about, but it's the best focus for the sound. And the more you do it, the more you find that focusing coming out, and then you can project it out and fill an audience even while talking quite softly. People will hear. People will project. You should feel when you speak that you're speaking out here. So many people, when they speak like this, and they hardly move their lips, and everything's sort of inside. And you wish they wouldn't mumble. Well, you need to enunciate clearly and get the sound as if you were putting the sound out here. One very important thing in singing is to open the mouth wide. That's one reason that Italian bel canto is so famous, because the Italians naturally open their mouths more, and it produces a much better sound. Take people up in Sweden where it's cold and they have to sort of keep their mouths closed to keep the cold air from coming inside, and they talk like that, and you don't see them smiling much even. The more you go down to the south, the more you find this tendency to open the mouth. And I'll never forget, I felt as if I had crossed the Rubicon practically when I finally could convince myself, to my own initial shame, to pronounce the word cuando the way the Romans do it. We say cuando, but they say cuando. And I just couldn't get that quack and feel normal. But finally, I got myself to say cuando, and they all looked at me. Yes, of course, that's normal. Sort of like when I was in Australia years ago, and I was sort of for fun imitating their accent. They just looked at me as if, well, it's the way people speak. It wasn't anything funny to them. They took it for granted that perhaps they even thought finally I was learning English. I don't know. But anyway, you do, when you sing, need to learn to open your mouth. Why, when, I do. So even when you say do, it's not do, it's do. And yet you want to pronounce the words the way they're spoken. And here I go against a lot of the dogma in singing teaching, because they will say that to get the sound right, you can't sing the way it would be spoken. And I know that's true to a certain extent, but as much as possible, try to pronounce the words the way you'd say them in speaking. So you don't say when, you say when, because that's the way we say it. Don't make it artificial, don't make it false. But there are times when you have to do it a little bit. That's where artistry comes in. I can't tell you all those things. That's where you have to feel, well, okay, it may be the way we say it, but it doesn't sound right. Sort of like that song sung by some choir, and I don't think they were even from Missouri, but they sang Shenandoah. Across the wide Missouri. And it sounded so fake. First of all, because it wasn't the way they'd ever say it. Secondly, because it wasn't nice to hear. If it doesn't sound good, then why not say Missouri? Across the wide Missouri. Sounds a lot better, and Missourians may shudder, but I say at least I don't have to hear them shudder. I'm over in California or Assisi. So the thing is that that's where artistry comes in, and it's not going to be that everybody agrees. But you do have to do it according to some deliberate sense. Don't be artistic by accident. It doesn't happen that way. Artistry does mean you know what you're doing. You know, I often, after I've written a piece of music later on, I look at it and I think, how on earth did I ever do that? But while writing it, whenever I talk self-deprecatingly like that, people may get the idea that, well, he just sort of stumbled into it, but that really isn't so. I do know what I'm doing, because I have the artistic sense, whatever it is, to concentrate on it. I feel it, and I know I'm right. I don't mean to say that another right wouldn't also be right, but I know I'm doing what I want to do, and I know that I want to do it, and I know why I want to do it. Well, that's the way you should sing, so that every note that you sing has control behind it. Well, we begin, as I said, in this simple way. Then bring it up more. Well, it's difficult to concentrate a hum here at the point between the eyebrows, but you can then begin. And then you get all the vowels. You know, the real pronunciation of the vowels is not the way we do it in English. The basic universal vowels are not A, E, I, O, U. In fact, those aren't even vowels. They're diphthongs. A, E, I, O, U. What the real vowels is A, E, I, O, U. Without any diphthong. And to do that in your singing lesson, you bring that sound more and more. By the time you've reached the open eye, you feel as if you were really opening up the spiritual eye and reaching out to the audience. Now at that point, it's good to vocalize further. how with that, the sound is coming up. Now here's something I do that Marie Zimmermann didn't teach me, but I've learned, and it's valid. That is to concentrate on the chakras. I don't just try to concentrate on a chest tone. In fact, I'm not really interested in chest tones, but I do try to bring the heart chakra into it. Now, there's a big difference between mo, that's obviously just coming from a tension in the throat, mo, which is more the way she taught me, but not right yet. But I'm giving that rather exaggerated example of the way not to do it to show you the difference. Mo, mo, yeah. See how there's a heart in it? If you try bringing the heart chakra into it. We work with the upper chakras. It's true that you can sing with the lower chakras. In fact, if you listen to the Tibetan monks, you'll find that they're singing from the lower chakras. And it's, even for me, I certainly have a lot of admiration for where they do it, but also it's a little amusing to me, partly perhaps because I don't know the words, and I'm convinced that all Tibetans ever say is Om Mani Padme Hum. But anyway, they're there. And they can get way, way down, but that's all lower chakra. It would be a good thing to start thinking of the ego as being in the heart. Remember, we know that the ego is here in the physical body, but Master also said, there's something that Master Ramana Maharshi said too. He spoke of the I as being centered here, and at first I used to think, is this a contradiction between two masters? That doesn't make sense. But you noticed how Master in his poem, in his chapter on cosmic consciousness, said, I cognized the center of this empyrean as a point of intuitive perception in my own heart. And if you think of your whole being as centered here and then expressing itself from there, then think of it like a violin bow being stroked gently across the strings. When a good violinist plays, it's a strong but gentle thing. It's not a rasping sound, it's not a jerking sound. There's strength, there's gentleness, and there's power, all of them expressed in that. Well, that's what you want to do coming up through the chakras. And the first chakra to develop this way, and it's a way to also develop your consciousness of the chakra. Try to sing from ma, mo, yeah. Try to feel as if you were stroking your voice upward. It's good even to do what I'm doing with my hand. Feel as if you were using your hand to bring that voice up through the center of the spine. Live and sing from your center. And here I go beyond the thought of just using the voice, the body, as a sounding board. Use the chakras as a sounding board. Use your state of consciousness as a sounding board. And you'll notice the difference that comes with that. But it'll help you to bring the hands upward. Oh, yeah. Then the next thing is to try to bring it not only past the heart, but through the cervical. The cervical, the heart, as you know, imitates vibrations of love, feeling. You don't want that feeling to be disturbed, even if the feeling of the song itself is disturbed. I remember Roger Hodgson of Supertramp. He gave me a ticket to attend his concert in Paris, and as you know, I'm not exactly a fan of rock music, but I was most impressed at the way he played and sang. He was so centered in himself, and really good music always comes from that center. Singers who feel that they've got to do a lot of exaggerated movement. I remember this French singer, his name eludes me right now, but he came to America and I heard him singing in concert. And when he sang the Marseillaise, which is the French national anthem, he kneeled down to make a good impression on the audience. And my impression of him had already been formed, but it definitely helped to put the period on it. What a phony. You don't have to make a big display of your feeling, just feel it. And people will be touched by that feeling, and if they aren't sensitive to be touched, they aren't the ones you should be singing for. You don't want to impress them with flashy pyrotechnics. Impress them with your consciousness. Impress their souls, not their minds. So if you sing from the heart, then try to bring it through the cervical. The cervical center, opposite the throat, is the center from which radiate outward in your consciousness peace, calmness, expansion. And the more you can bring it's very difficult to get that tone really centered there, but once it is, you'll find that the influence not only on you but on other people will have a very calming effect. It will expand their consciousness. When you feel an expansion of consciousness in meditation, you may notice that it comes from here. And so you want to direct, first of all, feeling. You want to direct that feeling upward, otherwise it becomes emotion. Whenever your feelings turn to tears, then you lose the energy and you feel sort of exhausted afterwards. And whereas all devotional tears are cleansing and beautiful, nonetheless, if you can control them and direct them up toward the spiritual eye, they will bring you much more power and much more feeling of the presence of God. So these feelings, and I'm talking yoga now, but the voice ties in with yoga beautifully. The more you can bring the feeling and the voice up through the heart, the more that feeling will be directed towards superconsciousness. Then if you can bring it past the cervical, it will be directed toward not only love, but as love only can be expressed, really, through calmness, through expansion, not through the thought, I love you, but love itself, love infinite, love omnipresent. And then what you need to do, and this is the biggest barrier to get through of all, is the ego. Not the sense of self, the intuitive self, but the sense of ego. How people, you notice how popular singers, rock singers and so on, they sort of toss their heads around like that. It's because their ego is centered here. When people are haughty, let's say they've got a lot of money, and James, would you bring me my Cadillac, please? That kind of attitude that you'll find expressed even in the accents people use. They begin to talk more nasally. All the voice and the breath is all up here. Well, you want to keep it from being trapped in the ego, which brings the head back, and release it to come to the spiritual eye, because the spiritual eye is the door through which you can not only reach out to infinity, but also reach out to touch the souls of your hearers, of your listeners. So you need, while singing, to make every effort to release the tones through the spiritual, through the medulla oblongata to the spiritual eye. Now, you know, in my meditation room, I have a chair that's sort of rounded behind, and the psychology of that chair is to give you sort of a sounding board mentally. I don't know that the builder had that in mind, I don't know what, but it helps me that way. And I sort of feel that in singing too, we need to feel as if, yes, the ego is there, you can't do anything without the ego, but feel as if it were a sounding board projecting forward to the spiritual eye. So you don't try to bypass the ego, you have to go through the ego to soul consciousness. And that you can do by feeling as if there was this great sounding board of space behind you. And the more you can focus that, so that it's this tone coming up through the heart, through the cervical, through the medulla, and forward to a point like that, the more then you'll be able to feel. And this is what I actually consciously do when I'm in an audience hall. If there are 700 people, I try to project my aura, my tone, whatever, my consciousness, all the way to the back of the room. And I know that they'll hear me, and I know that they'll feel what I'm saying. You don't want to keep your aura just in the front row. Project your aura to the back, not just your tone, not just your volume. You can even sing softly, But if you have that consciousness, they'll hear that. So here are little exercises to help you. The first one I taught you, let's do it again. And I'll sing it and then you do it, and then I'll sing it and you try to do it. Do that repeatedly, and whoever is playing this tape, you can just stop the tape and get people to do it, then go back and start it again. But ma, 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 ma. You need to get flexibility in your voice too. Ma, ma. You'll notice the higher your voice goes, the more you need to open your mouth. You can sing ma, but ma, you have to, because it gets the tones higher there. If you notice, if you can see that movie, the Zauberflöte, the silver flute, or the magic flute, I guess, of Mozart, the Queen of the Night, I think she is, has to sing incredibly high tones, like, well, 2.5 or almost 3 octaves above middle C, just incredibly high, and very few people can do it. But if you're lucky enough to see it in video so that you can see them up close, you'll notice every time she hits that high note, she has to open her voice, her mouth, to be able to get it. And so when you're trying to sing a high note, you do have to open your mouth. That will distort the sound, and you have to try to use your lips in such a way as to correct for that distortion. So when, you'd be natural if you can open your mouth, say when, try to bring your lips together a little bit, say so, when, but get the mouth, the chin down, because that's what brings the projection up into these notes. And the notes will also follow the level of the chakra, so that the lower notes will be more down here, middle notes here, and then the higher you get, the more the tone will come up really into the head. But the consciousness itself should be coming up through the head all the time anyway, so it's not as if you are going up and down. It's just being projected more focused that way, but always going up. Now, different vocalizations are good. See how I do it at the beginning? I don't say moo. And so on, go up and down the scale. Then getting a little flexibility. And so on, up and then again down the scale. And this will make your voice more flexible than it will with all the various consonants, which we really don't have much problem with, and we don't need to pronounce them too much. Some languages have more, I think, than we do. I'll never forget an Austrian practicing speaking before a lecture. And I was surprised that people had to go through that, but I realized that with German, you need to. They have some very difficult sounds, and they need to sort of vocalize, you know, like that. And the more they do that, the more then when they pronounce the words, they can pronounce them clearly. We don't have so much of that. We have a little bit, but not too badly. The main thing is the vowels, and then learning not to overemphasize the vowels. And then another thing is that if you've got, as in a Handel oratorio, a note that begins with I, well, I is just a perfectly normal diphthong, isn't it? And so you don't want to go I. Sounds like ah, and the E comes in almost by accident. You've got to somehow, and this is your artistry again, but somewhere along the line you've got to make it clear that you're saying I without ending up E. How do you do it? Forget it. You figure it out. I had, however, have had to figure it out in songs that I've done, and I can't think of any examples, but somewhere along there's got to be that gradual transition that makes it clear that you're expressing that vowel without overemphasizing either end of it. That's the difficulty of English. Now, then you need not only the vocal flexibility that comes, as I've said, moo, moo is good because it forces the mind more here in concentration. Ma is good because it opens it up and projects it. E is good because it's a harder sound to project at all, in as much as the lips are out more. So, me, that's harder, but good to do. Therefore, brings all of those vowel sounds in and helps you to project them more easily. Then, ma, and in that you get a little bit more. Then you need to start doing more. And these are all good exercises to warm up with. Ma, 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 like that. Don't ever force it. If ever I found with my teacher that I was beginning to force it a bit, she'd get me right back to basics, starting all over again. In fact, it was in one of my last learning sessions with her, classes with her, that she stopped me right in the middle of a song. It was some song of Hugo Wolf. Am frisch geschnitten Wanderstab. I don't remember all the words now, but there was a high note that was a G. I can't normally sing G, but she said, that's your right range. You've got to learn how to get up there. And that's why I have no mercy on you tenors when you claim you can't sing G. You jolly well ought to, and you ought to practice until you can. And anyway, the thing is that by doing that exercise, you gradually get the flexibility to be able to do it. Ma. But she said, at that class, when I hit that G, she said, that note, that's the way they should all sound. Well, gosh, you can imagine, 6 months of teaching, 6 months of study. Finally, I hit one note right. But the other side of that is that you can see what an art this is. You can see how a person really needs to work at it. And when people say, oh, it sounds so easy the way you sing, it's because I've worked at it. And even when I'm not singing, I do work at it. I walk through the mall and try to make sure that my voice is placed here. Because what happens is that when it's not placed there, your voice gets tired. It runs. You run out. A lot of famous singing teachers have to quit singing in their 50s. They burn their voices out. But if you can sing and talk always with a well-placed voice, you're relaxed here, and even at the end of an all-day recording session, your voice will still be as fresh as it was at the beginning, because you're not overusing your vocal cords. You're just touching them lightly so that the sound can go through it. The power comes from the breathing. The power comes from the energy in the spine. Ma, ma. See, I'm not getting it right either now. Ma, ma. Do that up and down the scale several times, and really, that's all the warm-up you need. Flexibility of tone and the pronunciation of various consonant sounds, that'll come by itself fairly well. You do, however, need to, and I don't think it's such a problem for you, but you do need to pronounce your consonants clearly. Yes, if you have a problem with consonants, then you should do exercise that will help you to work on them. For example, here's a good tongue twister. Theophilus Thistle, the thistle sifter, while sifting thistles, got a thistle in his thumb. Can you say that one quickly? Theophilus Thistle, the thistle sifter, while sifting thistles, got a thistle in his thumb. Well, we do get twisted up in our S's and TH's, don't we? So it's a good thing for us to work on so that we don't stumble over ourselves. Clear pronunciation, clear enunciation is important. You're not being fair to your listeners if you don't pronounce your words clearly. That's why Shakespeare's speech in Hamlet, "Speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounce it to you, trippingly on the tongue." These are all words to bring the mouth forward. This is one of the disadvantages of American English. It's too much backward in the mouth. We need to bring it more forward. That's why Italian's beautiful for singing. But the oddity is that the Italians love English singing. I don't know quite why, but I must say I do love my language, I do. It has its beauty. For singing, it has its difficulties, however. R, for example, how much more beautiful it is to say vero or vero than vero, isn't it? And also a clear tone, vero instead of vero. It does sound cleaner. And the more we can bring cleanliness, you might say, keep it clean, more you can bring clarity to your enunciation, the more it will be understandable and also enjoyable to listen to. Nobody wants to have to work to figure out what you're trying to say. Now finally, what you need to do is tune in to Master and God and try to feel from their consciousness, their vibration. You know, more than anything else, what you're giving people is not a sound, but a vibration. I'm living here in Assisi, so I'm more aware of it now. And I do know that at Ananda Village and Palo Alto and Seattle and so on, that we have more people there who have had training in music. But I don't think anybody here in Assisi has had any training. And certainly nobody here has come for music, as most people don't come for music at Ananda. They've come because they love God. It's really quite astonishing in that context how many beautiful voices we have. And the same is true at Ananda, how many beautiful singers there are. It's not that they have great voices, it's that they have minds, they understand. There's a sweetness, there's a consciousness that they project. What I'd like you to do when you sing is try to produce consciousness, not just words, not just tones, not just music. All of those are vehicles for states of consciousness. And above all, your consciousness, and before you sing, always meditate. Get centered in your spine, get centered in yourself, and try to feel love, peace, calmness, joy, power. Not power over anyone. Power in the sense of excuse me. Power in the sense of divine energy. Don't confuse good taste and aesthetics with wimpishness. In really great music, there's greatness in power also. Control, however, not just sort of blown off. The more you can keep those states in mind when you're singing, then, if you're singing, "Go to sleep, little dear, may the angels draw near," you're not thinking power then, you have it in abeyance. You're not thinking joy then, you have that in abeyance. You're thinking calmness, yes, because you want the child to sleep. You're thinking love because you love the child. But mainly you're also putting yourself in the frame of mind of an innocent little baby. And so when you sing that song, have that consciousness of a baby being sung to sleep. What a baby would like to receive in hearing that song so that he will go to sleep. You're obviously not going to conk him on the head with a Coca-Cola bottle, so you want to soothe him with the sound of your voice to the point where he feels secure and ready to go to rest. And then when you sing, "The secret of laughter lies in the laughing, not in the search for joy," you have to feel joy. don't just think of it as a good little sort of a musical gymnast. It's a joyful piece. Lero, sing with that joy. Now, I tell you this, but I know that in fact you do it, and that's why so many people feel inspired when Ananda people sing. It isn't only the music. I certainly know that it's partly the music. It isn't only the inspiration that I feel or felt in writing it and that I felt in writing the words. It's also you. And it's you to the extent that you aren't doing it either, because I don't feel I'm doing it. I just feel that I'm calling on Master's power, on divine power, on Om, to bring this into manifestation, and then it comes so easily. I'm almost embarrassed at how easy it is for me to write a melody. But that's because I get out of the way. And I don't just passively let them do it. I say, okay, Master, now let's work out a melody. Okay, and here it is. It just comes like that. And you should sing like that too, so that when you sing, you feel that you not, oh Master, please sing through me, and you don't know what's happening, but you hope it happens. No, you should be conscious that He's there in you, in this sounding board, in your chakras, in your heart and cervical, that it's His power that you're bringing out to people. Feel that you are blessing people as you sing, so that your state of consciousness is what will really affect people. Something very interesting that Swami Vivekananda said was that the first thing you notice about people who practice yoga is that their voices become sweet. Now that's basically speaking true, and when I hear a voice that isn't, I worry about their yoga practice. I sometimes would like to take them aside and talk about this, because it may be that they're simply not allowing themselves to be conscious. We should try to give outward expression to our inward feeling and not bottle it up. And some people, in the name of perhaps a false humility, try not to express what they have in their hearts. I would like to say that singing is one of the best instruments, and singing this music that I've written that came from Master is a much better instrument than singing some of these emotional pieces that are offered by classical as well as popular singers as the alternative. I took a break there because we ran out of the tape, and so I won't talk much more, but I can fit more on the VHS than I can on this little digital film tape. And I wanted to finish that thought that when we sing to people, I said that Vivekananda spoke about the voice being automatically sweeter when you practice yoga, but you should project that. And singing in concert to bless people is really a wonderful sadhana for you, because it helps to make it concrete. It's not enough to have these lovely concepts up in abstract skies. We want to bring them down. And one way to make it concrete is by expressing that vibration through your voice to other people. And it is also very interesting to see how, by singing, our people's voices have become really very good. Now, mind you, they aren't necessarily professional quality voices. Some may, others less so. But to be perfectly sincere, I would much rather listen to one of our Ananda choirs than I would to the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Because they're professionals and they sing like professionals, and that's all they sound like. Sounds like a good mechanism, sort of channeled through human voices. Whereas Ananda people, you feel that they're angels singing. And the more you can feel that that's your role, is to be an angel singing God's inspiration to other people, people's lives become changed. And ultimately, that is the purpose for what you're doing, is to change their lives, to uplift them, to bless them, and not merely to give them a nice piece of entertainment. The music that we have, the music that you sing, all of this has a definite purpose. It's part of the art of living. And if you'll notice the way, in fact, it would be very wonderful in classes for our teachers, especially our music ministry teachers, to bring these points out, how all the melodies I've written, there isn't a note in any of them that hasn't been done with this consciousness. Seriously, I mean that. I feel the thought that I want to express, the mood that I want to express, but I hold it up to the superconscious and I try to feel its attunement with that. La 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 la. It's sort of like the movement of the energy in the spine, smoothly and easily. I was asked a question about when human hopes toward the aspire. There you have the question that we talked about earlier. This was asked me during the break that we just took. That when human hopes toward the aspire. So you have to bridge it. So it's not aspire or aspire. It's just a gentle transition between the two so that people don't get the feeling they're really getting another word altogether, and then you stock them with this wet, filled stocking at the end of the note. But it's all the way through, just clearly, aspire. And in all of these songs, I think if you work at them, that you will find this to be the case. Another thing is, don't exaggerate to the point where it sounds either ugly or wrong. Now, one very interesting and important example is, let's see, well, how does that one confine, what is that?
Earthly walls confining.
What?
From earthly walls confining.
Ah, yes. From, how's the melody?
From earthly walls.
Oh, yes. That one from the last song of the oratorio. From earthly walls confining. Now there I'm going against my own teaching, because we don't say confining, in America at least. We say confining, confining. It's an ugly sound, that And I said, let's go for beauty and forget the technicality, just like I do on Mazura. From earthly walls confining. It doesn't sound good. It's not music. But from earthly walls confining. You see, there's sweetness there. There's more dignity. So there are times when, yes, you need deliberately to change a sound, and for one reason or another. So I don't want to make a dogma out of it, but I do want to say that whatever changes you make, do it consciously. And then Jeannie asked the question during the little break that we had, who is Sylvia? What is she? And I don't say she. What is she? And because you don't get as nice a sound when you go E, but you get a nicer one here when the lips are a little bit more together, and you can get more of the E sound from behind the lips, and also with a slight smile. Actually, to sing with a smile helps to get those sounds better. So it's not like a big grin, she, but she. Sort of the way Savitri speaks. So I think that's all for now. I think that I could go on and on and on, but this is a good lesson, I hope. And some other time perhaps we can go into other aspects of it. God bless you.